Hey everyone, I'm Zach Rice, and welcome to a big time AMA with Matt Tonks, our CTO. Matt, thank you so much for being here, man.
Sure thing. Happy to be here.
Matt, we received about 300 questions for the AMA, and these were the questions that were most repeated and frequently asked by the community. Jumping right into it, probably the most asked question, what are the plans for PvP? Can we expect guild PvP, territory PvP, savage open world PvP? And of course, when is it coming? It's a very loaded question.
Sure. So the plans, I guess the first thing to do here is to preface all of this by saying timelines are subject to change. If something's not ready, we're not going to release it before it's ready. So I'll give you my best guess for timelines of all the questions in this AMA, but they could easily change if something comes up. Priority shift constantly. So don't take this as a concrete date by any means, but we will do the best we can to follow what I'm talking about. But anyway, we're really excited about PvP in general. I think it'll probably be an iterative kind of like we'll put out a smaller version of PvP, and then we'll expand it over time, and then we'll expand it some more, and kind of use feedback from the player base to steer which direction we want it to go in as we figure out what's working and what's not. Our current thinking for PvP, and again, this is all subject to change depending on, as we prototype these things. If it feels like it's not working, we'll probably change our minds and change something. But we feel like it'll probably be a player versus environment versus player type situation, at least our first iteration of this. We think that will probably end up being more interesting and more fun than just, say, like a deathmatch where you've got a bunch of teams that are directly going head to head. Obviously, PvP will mean you can kill other players, you can attack other players, but we'll probably do that in a way where you're fighting in an arena or in a zone where the main goal is not necessarily to kill the other players, but to capture as much loot as you can, and you have to kind of compete with the other players in that space at the same time. So we think that'll be a bit of a more interesting game mode where you can get a good party together, and different strategies will emerge. Well, different strategies will emerge. And we like the idea that a team could decide to try and hide from the other players and wait until the end. That might be a viable strategy. A team could just go all out and say, nope, we're just going to go out and kill all the players first, and then we'll have the whole zone to ourselves. Those are all really interesting decisions that we kind of want to leave in the players' hands. And I think that'll make it more interesting. So that's about as much as I can say about PvP, at least for the very first go around. And as far as when it's coming, we're trying to do that very soon. It won't be in the next patch. The next patch coming out the next major update is .30. That one is not going to have PvP in it, although we are already working on PvP, so it's kind of happening in parallel. But like I said, we don't want to release it to the public before we think it's ready. So we're targeting for the patch after 30, which would be .31. And again, take that with a grain of salt. We might push it back if we don't feel like it's ready, but that's really what we're pushing for. We're very excited about PvP, and we think it'll add a lot to the game and the meta. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll announce more once we have more details in place. We'll probably do some trailers and lots of fanfare surrounding PvP as well.
Man, I know the whole community is going to be so excited for the release of that.
Yeah, we're excited about it too. Sorry to talk over you there.
No, you're all good. Can we expect improvements in game optimization, such as minimizing lag or reducing crashes?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this isn't optimizations have been going on since we launched the game. You'll probably, if anybody's paying attention, you'll probably notice that we've already fixed a number of crashes. We had server crashes at one point where players were getting kicked out of servers fairly frequently in a couple patches, and we went back and fixed those. It's kind of a cat and mouse game where whenever we add new features and add new content to the game, there's a chance that those new features and new content will introduce a crash or introduce some bad performance. So it's not like a one-time thing. If we wanted to make it a one-time thing, that would also mean we need to stop adding stuff to the game, which we're not going to do. So, the game is going to be ever evolving for the foreseeable future, but we will obviously continue to optimize and fix crashes as we find them. I think in terms of crashes, actually, right now we're pretty good. We have like a crash reporting system where we can tell when the servers crash or when the clients crash, and we pay attention to that pretty religiously. Basically, every time we do a hotfix or a patch, there's a number of fixes in there. Anything that we're seeing affecting live players, we try to fix it immediately. So optimization is a little bit of a longer term thing, depending on which optimization or what the scenario is. Obviously, a crash either happens or it doesn't, so it's kind of easy to identify and fix those usually. But optimizations is a sliding scale, and it's a diminishing return sort of curve where we can spend 80% of the time to get mostly there, and then if we want to get that last bit of to get the everything running as perfectly as we would want, we probably have to spend 10 times as much time as we did getting kind of halfway there. So that doesn't mean we're not optimizing. We definitely are. It's something we pay attention to as well. But depending on the scenario, it may or may not happen right away. There's certain types of situations that are very challenging to optimize. For example, when you've got a whole bunch of players all in one spot, say in the overworld or maybe in a public event or something like that, and there's a whole bunch of enemies all in the same spot, like that's kind of the worst case scenario for both server and client performance. So those types of things will probably be the last to get super fast, but we're always working on improving things in there, and we especially pay attention to kind of the more normal situations where like you're in a dungeon with with a party of 6 and there's a bunch of creatures on screen. We try to make that run as quickly as possible, so that at least in kind of the normal scenario, people are getting good frame rate. But it just depends. Lots of different things can slow performance down, but again, that's something that we pay attention to and we're constantly working on.
That's really informative. Thank you. All right. How will the party finder work, and when is it coming? And final part, is a friends list coming too?
Yes, I'm happy to say that the Party Finder is coming in the .30 release. So that'll be our next major release.
Cool.
As far as how it'll work, it will probably expand upon the functionality over time, but at least the very first iteration will be a button inside the party menu that you click on, and it will look at your currently equipped pocket watch to see what class you are and what level you are, and then it tries to you get thrown into a queue, and it will look at other people that are of compatible level range to you and group you up, and then once it has a minimum number of people in a viable party, it'll say, okay, I found a party for you. It will add all of the people that it found to a party and put you in an instance. Or actually, we may end up putting you in the party leader's personal metaverse to start with. That way, it kind of takes a lot of the communication load and just kind of grunt work of finding parties away from the players. So if you just want to jump in and play with whoever's available, you just click the button. And as it's searching for players, I should say, you can continue playing. So it's kind of like World of Warcraft queuing, if you've ever played that game. As it's looking for a party, you're not like stuck in a UI or anything. It'll just go in the background so you can keep doing something else if there's a long queue time or something like that. It's not going to impede your normal play. And the last part of this question about friends lists, that's also something that's coming in the .30 release, along with some various other social features, like we're adding direct messaging. We've revamped, this is less glamorous, but we've revamped the chat backend. So it should be much more responsive. And I know a lot of people have trouble with it getting slow, especially under high load. The messages take a while to appear and things like that. So we've reworked the way that the backend works to be a little bit quicker. And of course, allow players to message each other directly and add friends lists and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, lots of cool social party matchmaking features coming in .30.
You'll have a lot of friend requests coming in. I'll tell you that much. That's for sure. All right. Another question. Do you still have plans to add mounts to the game? And what about pets?
Yes and yes. These are sort of further in the future, to the point where any guess I could give you in terms of when we would add them would probably be wrong. But they're both things that we think are awesome, and they're definitely stuff we want to do. I think you'll probably see pets before mounts, maybe. We might change our mind on that. But yeah, I can tell you it's probably not going to be in 30 or 31. So maybe in 32, but we'll see. It depends on what our priorities are. Currently, our biggest priority is PvP, and the team being quite small, we have to kind of pick and choose which of our favorite things we want to spend time on, because we just don't have enough time and people to do everything that we want to. But as the the sun moves around the earth and time continues on. We'll eventually get all of this stuff in. It's just a matter of which ones we want to do first.
Just a matter of when, basically.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Can we expect to see a female character in patch 0.30?
If yes, well, if it's not in .30, it'll be in .31. This is something that we've been working on, and this is a pretty big undertaking. We have to obviously do things like have different voices for the female character model, but also all of the gear. You know, there's I don't even know now, probably thousands of pieces of gear that you can wear in the game between the NFTs and the actual like in-game gear. Those all have meshes that need to get adjusted because the female character model has different proportions. So that it's just a big chunk of work. But we've been chewing through all of that, and I think, like I said, either in 30 or 31, you should see the female character model. I think, again, we could push that out if it doesn't seem like it's ready in time.
Gotcha. Understood. When is Epoch City planned to launch?
Epoch City will be in .30, so that's an exciting one too. To go along with Epoch City, we're also redoing a lot of the early game, like the first-time user experience is what we call it, like the first 10 levels, basically. So that should be much more interesting and engaging and more fun. It's got some funny moments in it too, but that kind of dovetails into Epoch City. And then Epoch City will be the new water town, basically. That's like the hub area where all the vendors will be, and realistically, whenever you're popping in and out of the game, you'll start in Epoch City on your way to wherever else you're going.
That'll be perfect with all the social features. That'll just work perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Epoch City has lots of cool social areas. There's like a nightclub in there and stuff like that. That should be a fun area to hang out, we think. So we're excited about that.
That will be so much fun. Okay, will there be a ranged character with guns or archery or something along the lines of that?
Yes. So the first one you'll see is probably like a bow archery. That one, I don't have a timeline for that exactly, but it's something that we've talked about a lot and kicked around. We prototyped it a bit already, actually. So sometime soon. I know that's more vague than you probably want, but that's definitely something we want to look into. And more further in the future, like probably when we jump to a new season, we have been always looking at seasons as like a major reset, or at least a big departure from the current game mechanics, where the narrative and the game world is all about alternate universes and time travel. So we want to lean into that, and that allows us to do things like in the next season, maybe you'll be in the future instead of in the past. And in the future, it doesn't really make sense to be swinging swords around. So we'll probably have guns and maybe energy weapons, things of that nature in that next season. We'll see how that goes. That's pretty far in the future, but that's kind of what we're thinking. But you'll definitely see range stuff before long.
So it's whatever's period correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Or whatever's correct with the crazy alternate universe that we come up with. But
right. Is there going to be a larger story with villains and such bad guys?
Yeah, I mean, we have some of that with the quest lines that we introduced in 2.7, I think it was. So you'll see more of that getting layered in as time goes on, where there's kind of like a center series of quests that we call a quest line, that as you complete the quest, you get a little bit of narrative delivery. And as you complete more sort of like side quests and parallel quests, you get a bigger picture of what's going on and who the villains are. And you'll definitely see more of that as time goes on, especially as we kind of wrap up more of the core game mechanics, like PvP, for example. We'll have more time to spend on that sort of thing. We've again, small team, not very much time, so we have to pick and choose what we want to spend our cycles on. And we think that kind of core game mechanics and like building out our game progression usually are a higher priority than trying to get cinematics and cutscenes and cool narrative delivery in the game. But that doesn't mean we're not doing it. We are, and you saw some of that in 2.7. You'll probably see a lot more of that actually with the new Epoch City release. The early Fatui stuff is a bit more narrative story driven. So it'll be an incremental, or rather, you'll see it get better slowly over time, I guess is the short answer.
Okay, understood. Kind of in that vein, are there any plans on expanding the world map? And what plans are there for the overworld?
Yeah, so I assume the world map is talking about like Time's End, the big overworld area.
Yeah.
That has, if you've probably noticed already, if you played the game, that if you go kind of the boundaries, you can see some other continents off in the distance there.
Yep.
Those were always planned to be opened up eventually, and that's probably something that we'll do sometime after we get Epoch City in place. We might actually shuffle around the way that you travel between continents, so that like effectively each continent would be its own server instance. But really, they'd all be part of one big overworld and give players a lot more kind of open space to explore. But yeah, so I guess the short answer is yes.
There's so many times I tried to ninja leap to those far off continents and died so many times.
I keep trying. Eventually, you'll get over there.
Eventually. All right. Another question here. This is more complicated. In regards to blockchain and NFTs, how is development different from your previous projects? Is it harder? Does it take more time? If you could just shine some light onto that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the short answer is yeah. It is. It is harder. There's a lot of other constraints introduced by the fact that these assets are uh, scarce, they're limited, and they need to be immutable for the most part. You don't want to give someone an NFT that the visuals just randomly change later, or we like take it out of the game or something like that. So you have to, it takes a lot more thought about what the NFTs are and how they're going to be introduced to the game in a way that's not going to like break ourselves into jail, for lack of a better phrase. But it's also technologically more challenging in lots of ways. A lot of what we spend our time on at Big Time, or at least in the early days, especially, was building up our infrastructure so that we could actually interact with the blockchain in a way that was compatible with the real-time, quick nature of games, and that's where OpenLoot comes in. We have this OpenLoot platform that you all know and love. That's where you buy and sell your items, and you get access to our partner games and things of that nature. But really, what OpenLoot is a big stack of technological tools that we built that allow us to give people NFTs even if they don't have a wallet, or withdraw or deposit crypto from various chains. All the stuff that OpenLoot does, we had to build that ourselves, and that's definitely a more challenging thing than you typically find in a game development arena. Certainly, if you're not doing blockchain stuff, there's lots of other platforms out there that kind of solve all the financial issues for you. You could put a game on Steam, for example, and Steam handles all the credit card payments. They handle all the chargebacks. They handle the like nuts and bolts of actually making people's accounts and all that kind of stuff. And they take that problem away from the developers having to worry about it. And that's kind of what OpenLoot is doing for games that want to work in the blockchain arena. So that's a great set of tools, and it's a great reason to use OpenLoot if other game developers are interested in making blockchain games. But we had to build that first, so it was definitely added time. It adds complexity, and it adds lots of you have to be more careful as we're going. I mean, for Big Time especially, or specifically, I mean, we were very careful about how the NFTs were going to interact with the kind of normal game, for lack of a better term. Like the items that you put on that actually make your character more powerful. None of those are purchasable, right? We wanted to avoid pay to win trap. Like lots of other games have tried pay to win to various degrees of success, but we really thought that we wanted to avoid the issue of somebody being able to drop a bunch of cash and suddenly be the most powerful player in the game without really putting in the effort.
Right.
So we try to marry the two worlds as much as possible, where we have like the crafting economy, which you have to rent or buy NFTs in order to participate in that. But there's also in-game items that are required to make those crafts happen, which means that either the people crafting have to interact with people playing the game, or they have to be playing the game directly. And the more that we add stuff like that, the more I think it kind of adds this symbiotic relationship between the economy part of the game and the gameplay part of the game, where you need both. And you have a good reason to go play the game and have fun, and it's like rewarding, and also rewarding mentally, but also like financially. You can go play the game and actually get the crafting materials you need to make those items back in the personal metaverse. And everything should be kind of a two-way street, and that takes more thought and it takes more planning, and it's certainly not easy to do, because not a lot of people have done it successfully so far. I won't say that we're 100% successful so far, but we're doing pretty well. I'm pretty proud of where we're at. But it took quite literally, it took several months of planning and simulation, and there's this tool called machinations where you can simulate the game economy, and how it relates to the rest of the game loops. And we built a big sim for that, and lots of spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff in order to get where we are today. But I think it was worth it. So yeah, long-winded answer, but there you go.
No, I love it. All that hard work is paying off. And kind of a follow-up, how many developers are on the team now?
I'd have to look up the exact number, but it's about 35, I think, on the game team. That is, we have another team that's focused on the open loot side of things, which isn't very big. I think there's 6 engineers over there. So all told, it's quite a small company, especially when you're comparing to traditional game teams. A 35-person team is nothing compared to certainly like Fortnite or I don't know, Assassin's Creed or any of those projects. They have thousands of people on those teams, so it's a little different. But
Right.
we pride ourselves in how much we're able to do with a very small crew.
It is, and it is amazing what you guys have done.
Thank
Okay,
you.
will cracked hourglasses always be part of the economy?
I don't know about always. Probably. I mean, we don't have any plans to take them out. Always is rather final, but
Right.
yeah, for at least for the foreseeable future, I think they'll be in there.
Got it. Understood. All right. How does Big Time plan to attract more W2 players? Those are willing to spend money on skins in the game.
I think W2 refers to Web 2, probably. Yeah, so I think that just comes down to the fundamentals of the game. We need to build uh, more polished on ramps, like especially that first time user experience that I was just talking about. I think that's an important part of attracting non Web3 gamers to the space. You once they are interested in the game and they download it, you want them to have a very smooth process of learning all the mechanics and getting up to the point where they feel like they can really interact with the game in a meaningful way. And that's a big part of it. But also just adding more, like completing more content and more stuff to do in the game, I think is a big part of it. And just generally iterating on our kind of core game mechanics and making them feel better. Adding cooler stuff for the players to do, adding or removing friction points. Like the party finder is a good example of this. If you're a new player coming into Big Time, I think one of the biggest challenges right now is the game is very much balanced for party play, and if you can't find a party, it's not great, right? Like you can play solo, but it's pretty hard, and
Certainly
we
not as
want to.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not as fun. And I mean, and that was a conscious choice that we made because I think playing in a party generally is more fun, but only once you have the party.
Right.
So that's where the party finder comes along and will hopefully solve a lot of that. And I think that's a big ongoing thing that you'll see us trying to do is address those friction points as we identify them. Some of them are harder to address than others. Like the party finder is a pretty significant amount of work to get right anyway. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to snap our fingers and have all the problems fixed, but we will keep making things better as time goes on. And I think the next step for attracting Web 2 players is kind of when we end up turning off the invite code requirements and just letting whoever wants to play.
Right.
That'll be a big step for us. That's probably coming sometime this year. And you'll probably see Big Time appear on other platforms as well, which might also be another step. And that's about as much as I can say at this point, but
Oh wow.
hopefully gives you some idea.
Oh wow, that's insanely cool. Speaking to the team play, do you consider adding a voice system into the game? A lot of people would think that would be an awesome option if they could communicate through voice with other
Yeah,
players.
it's definitely something we've considered. It's not a slam dunk, right? Like, I mean, obviously we can add voice chat in the party or whatever, but um, voice chat can be very annoying. Especially if you have people abusing it. So
For sure.
that's something that we're aware of very much. You see voice chat in lots of other games, and they have it and it works, but it's not necessarily better. And I think we probably will add it, just as so it's an option that's out there. The other thing to consider too is Big Time is a very international game, so voice chat is probably not going to be very useful if you're playing with somebody from another country and you don't speak their language.
True.
One thing that we would love to do, and I don't have a timeline for this, but we would love to be able to have live chat transcription. So, or not transcription, translation. So, as you're chatting with your party or whatever, in whatever your native language is, the game would be translating on the back end to whoever else is in your party to their native language. And I think that'll be a really cool thing too. Of course, that's not trivial to do. It takes a lot of server time and resources, and of course, you have to build the tech force as well. But we definitely want to expand into both of those areas. And I think you'll probably see voice chat come online before the translation, just because of how complicated the translation stuff is. But it's something that we're kind of hesitant about, as you can tell, because we've all of us have played online games where the voice chat is just a nightmare.
A mess. It's a mess.
And so we want to try to avoid that, or at least if we turn on voice chat, do it in a way that has lots of options for muting and opting into the channels and stuff like that, so that if you really just don't want to listen to a person screaming in your ear, you can turn them off. That kind of
Reduce those decibels of people screaming. That is for sure. What plans are there to play with other platforms such as Xbox, PlayStation, or even tablets?
So a lot of this is dictated by the platform owners themselves. As it stands today, Microsoft, Sony, Apple, Google are both not very friendly to crypto games, to varying degrees. So if we see somebody like Xbox come along and say, "Yeah, you're welcome to come join the platform," we'll probably investigate that. I don't know. We'd have to make a judgment call at that time whether it makes sense to divert resources to that versus something else that we're working on. But that's definitely something that we would love to do at some point. So kind of depends on a lot of external factors at this point. So I don't really have an estimate. It seems like as time goes on, all those platform holders are getting slowly more friendly to crypto. I know Apple especially has started to allow some crypto apps on the platform to a limited degree. So I wouldn't be surprised if that changes at some point. You might see an inflection point where suddenly it's a viable thing to put on those platforms, but currently it's not. So that's the most I can tell you at the moment.
Got it. Hear you loud and clear. Are there any plans to link Big Time to the Epic Games Store or Steam, similar to how Boss Fighters is linked with Epic Games?
Steam is a no-go at the current moment, because Steam is very anti-crypto at the current state anyway. So that you probably won't see that anytime soon, unless Gabe Newell decides to change his mind or whatever. Gabe, if you're listening, I think we can do it safely, but we don't have control of that. Epic Games Store is somewhat friendly to crypto, so you might see that at some point. They're still a little bit hesitant, so we kind of have to navigate that carefully, but that's definitely something we're investigating.
Understood. And what is your vision of Big Time in 5 years' time? Where would you like it to be?
Oh man, 5 years seems like a really long time. I think the biggest things that I can think of that I think you'll probably see in Big Time are like a fully fleshed out PvP system, like we were talking about at the top of the call. We'd love to see more user generated content of some kind, which might be like interesting ways for people to build puzzles or competitions or bases inside their personal metaverse. Like you could imagine something where in the PvP world you have to build up a little base to try and defend it against other players, or you can build a base that allows you to craft inside the shared PvP world or something like that. A little bit of a survival builder elements. I think we would love to put in there. We've talked about mounts and pets. We've talked about new seasons. So I think in 5 years' time, you probably see just a huge amount of new variety of game mechanics. By that time, we'll have at least a couple more seasons out, and we really intend to make each season a pretty big departure from previous seasons in terms of how the game feels and plays. So, the sky's the limit, really. But it just depends on what you guys relate with. As we put content out, even after we are a fully public, there's no invites necessary to play the game. We don't plan on changing the way we iterate, right? Like, we think it's really valuable to be able to get stuff out into players' hands quickly, and get feedback quickly and react quickly, rather than trying to lock everything down and not release any patches for 18 months and just kind of go away into our own little hole and then put a patch out and hope that it's great, because it probably won't be. we much rather like help or let the community help us guide the game into a place that everybody likes, and that's
You're
probably what we'll continue doing.
you're in the trenches with the community. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of
exactly. Yeah,
right. That makes a
and
lot of sense.
that's a good thing to mention. Actually, we're very grateful for how much the community engages with that process, especially like the player council. Those guys give us tons of great feedback. We find not only bugs and broken stuff, but they're constantly giving us like, oh, it would probably be cool if you guys did this, and we listen to that. We often we take those suggestions and implement them as soon as we can. And the more that happens, the better the game will be. So it's great to have that avenue open.
Oh, for sure. Um, Another question. This is a big one. Fishing, sports, and pet races. Will those be added in the future?
Fishing, yes, that's actually something we talk about a lot. Weirdly,
Cool.
but
Nice.
we're working on like professions, and fishing would be one of those. So you might also see like I don't know, mining and topiary and things like that that are like give people a profession that they can like level up and use to craft stuff. And I don't know what the set of all the professions will be at this point, but that's definitely something that we are kicking around and working on internally at the moment. So at some point you'll see fishing for sure. Sports is I don't know, that was a complicated one.
Yeah.
Maybe like that's so one of the like I was talking about user generated content in the personal metaverse. I could see some sort of sports style competitions possible in there where people could build like an obstacle course that people have to try and compete in the best time, or a puzzle that somebody builds in their personal metaverse and you're trying to compete for who could get through it in the quickest time. I don't know if that qualifies as sports, but that's something that we've talked about and we like that idea. Pet races, I don't know how that would work, but maybe. We like we have a lot of Pokemon fans on the team, so we like the idea of pets acting as your sort of like parallel combatants, if that makes any sense. Like you go into the field and engage in battle, and maybe your pet has to fight the enemy's pet while you're fighting the enemy. So that's not really a race, but maybe mount races. I don't know. Who knows? We could incorporate that into PvP someday, but hopefully that gives you a taste. I can't really make any promises about pet races in sports so much, but
Jousting.
we'll see what
You never
happens. Yeah,
know.
you
Maybe
never
one day
know.
on your pet, you never know, on a T-Rex. That would be so cool. All right. What are the devs' plans for the boss room? This is a question, of course, from the community. The game needs fun and challenging bosses. So if you could shine some light on that.
Sure. Yeah. You probably notice that some of the bosses, or some of the boss encounters, I mean, are much more expansive than others. And that's the first thing that we're trying to address is making sure all the boss encounters are at least up to par. Like for example, the rotating rings boss fight is way more fleshed out than some of the other ones, and especially like the earlier missions that we built, 2 years ago now. And we're trying to kind of prop them all up to be an equal level. So you should see. I think realistically, the design team is mostly tapped for Epoch City and the Fatui change, or the first time Fatui stands for first time user experience changes in 30. So it may be that you'll start seeing all these changes I'm talking about for boss fights in 31. Although I know that they would really love to get some of those improvements in for 30. So we'll see. It just depends on how much time we have. We sort of have an enormous list of things that we want to get into every update,
Right.
and then eventually reality sets in, and it's like, well, we got to get something out quickly. So it's if you imagine there's a suitcase and you're trying to stuff as many clothes in the suitcase as possible. Eventually, the
Right.
suitcase has to close, and everything that doesn't fit. So we'll see what fits into 30 and what doesn't. But that's
Yeah.
definitely something that's on our radar. Yeah.
Understood. What's practical and what you guys could do. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, when will the workshop collective set bonus be introduced? What's a rough ETA for that?
Hopefully in 30 as well. That's yeah. I think 30 is probably when it'll go in, but of course we might have to push it for some reason. But if it's not in 30, then I would expect it to be in 31, or possibly even it might be in a patch for 30. That's a possibility as well. We've been doing, like 2.9.1, and we're about to release 2.9.2. I don't know when people are going to listen to this, so maybe 2.9.2 is already out by the time anybody's hearing us. But we tend to put in sort of economic changes into those little smaller patches sometimes. So that could very well be that the very first version of 30 doesn't have workshop collections in it, and then we add it later. But hopefully it is in the very first version of .30. We'll see.
Got it. Understand. This is a very interesting question, very wordy. Okay, what percentage of the evolution of the game are we in, taking 100% as the number at which the game will be open to the world? Very interesting.
So I think the premise is a little bit flawed because
Yeah.
once the game will not be done when everything is open to the world, right? Like I expect once we take out all the kind of gates to get into the game, and you can just anyone that wants to download it can. And we're still going to be working on the game and adding content for a long time. So to answer the first part of the question, I would say big time as it is right now is maybe, I don't know, 10% done. It's not very much. There's a lot of stuff that we want to add, and we really have big plans. And I don't even know. We haven't tried to do a Gantt chart to chart it all out of how long that would actually be. But I expect that by the time we would get close to being done with the things that we know of now, we've already thought of a bunch of new things to add. So it's really, we intend big time to be a game as a service, and it's not going to be like it's done and we're going to walk away from it. No, it's going to be a thing that we're constantly adding content to. So once we feel like the core game is functioning really well, we'll probably just add new mechanics. So that's when we start switching away from propping up the main kind of progression flow of the game, and we start working on the next season, where the next season's all about guns and lightsabers or whatever it is that we want the next season to be. And so we have to build out all that stuff, all the content and game mechanics and balance and all that kind of stuff for the next season, whatever that ends up being. And then we'll probably keep doing that forever, basically. But once the game is open to the world, that will probably, like I said, it'll probably be sometime this year. And we won't even be ready for the next season by that time. So, and by season, I mean like that, the future content stuff that we were talking about earlier. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
That does. That is perfect. Thank you. A player asked, I noticed that there are plenty of crafting materials dropping in game that we have no use for. Can you share what those materials will be used for?
So this may just be a bit of confusion on the questions part, but as far as I know, all the crafting materials that are dropping in game are useful for something. A lot of them are useful for creating weapon gems. That might be the ones that you're seeing. But they are useful currently. So if you're not familiar with the weapon gem vendor, he lives in your personal metaverse, and you can actually make really powerful gems and socket them into your weapons. And each gem adds different bonuses and effects to a different part of your weapon combo. So I'm guessing that's what those are. If you have specific materials you're not sure what they are, I recommend you ask in Discord. Somebody can probably point you to the right place and tell you what they're for. We'll be adding more crafting materials as time goes on. One of the things that we're working on, I don't know exactly when it'll be done, is a more expansive crafting system for like potions and summon potions, health potions, speed potions, those sorts of things, as well as other items, gear itself. So you might have and it kind of dovetails in with the profession system I was talking about before, where we want to have like maybe a blacksmith that can create good armor. And in order to create that good armor, you need crafting materials to go into the recipe that makes the armor and so on. So you'll probably see more crafting materials appear as time goes on.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Real space have a big update like farming or upgrading buildings, cooking, or etc.
Yeah, so like we were just talking about with professions, cooking is one of those things that will probably go into that. We maybe have an oven or something like that you can place in the personal metaverse that would tie into the crafting system. But in addition to that, we have lots of plans for space. In the 2.9.2 release, we're adding some utility to the decorations that are in space so that they actually are useful for more than just being pretty. So that's kind of the first step into this, but we'd also like to add a lot more. We want to do things like guild personal metaverses where your guild can share a personal metaverse amongst each other, and maybe you can have like shared storage lockers. The other thing we want to do, or that we've kicked around and has just gotten pushed back for other higher priority stuff so far. But we definitely
Right.
want to do like a trading table where you could put some stuff up for sale in your personal metaverse and let other players come in and they could decide like, oh, it's basically a vendor that you control, so you can make some money in the game. This would just be in-game gold pretty much, by placing stuff in that trading table. Or like a shared vault locker in the personal metaverse is another thing that we kicked around. Like lots of those types of tiles or spaces I think you can expect to see in the future. And then the other thing that we're already pretty far along with is adding some very very rare but really awesome variants to the space tiles. So these would be like instead of a room in a mansion, this would be a variant where the exalted large space turns into a desert island.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's not just a room; it's like an entirely new environment with water and like a big skybox. And we have a couple other really cool similar ideas where it's like a giant mansion landscape that's not just a singular room. So you'll
Right.
see those coming online in the pretty soon, like in the next few months. I think we'll be releasing those, and by the next few months, I mean like in 30 or 31 probably.
Oh, wow, that's soon. Wow. Okay. The final question, because I know you're such a busy guy. I'll let you get back to your work. What are the most challenging issues in developing big time overall?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to that question about developing a blockchain game. I think the biggest challenges we're facing right now are trying to um, maintain an economy that doesn't have horrible imbalances anywhere. Because in a normal MMO or something like that, if people find a way to get more gold than they're supposed to, for example, it's not the end of the world. You can just kind of the game masters or the game can kind of fix those things and sweep them under the rug. But of course, when you're talking about stuff that's worth real money, the stakes are a lot higher. So we have to be much more careful about what changes we introduce and how we test them,
Right.
and just give things a lot more thought. And it just takes more time. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge that we're having right now is that the game is kind of more successful. Well, right when we released the game economy in .28, that we had an idea of how much excitement and attention that would garner, and we were way underestimating it.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but we're looking at ways to scale up our server infrastructure backend in ways that are not like super crazy expensive, that are gonna drive us into bankruptcy or something, but
Right.
also allow us to be more flexible so that we can like take the invite restrictions off and just let whoever wants to play into the game. But we really would right now. We'd much rather kind of have these limits in place so that we can control the environment for the people that do have access and make sure that things are working pretty well. We don't want to fall into that trap that lots of games fall into, where they're like, "Cool, the game is done, everyone can play," and then
Right.
the servers can't handle the load for however long, and you kind of degrade the game experience for everyone that is trying to play, not just the new people trying to play. So we want to kind of make sure that the players that have been in the game for a long time kind of have the same experience that we want them to have, and they're not trying to compete with thousands of new players and at the same time or whatever. So it's kind of a rambling answer, but it's kind of like one of those good problems to have, coupled with just having to be a lot more careful and thoughtful about changes because of all the stuff tied to blockchain.
That makes a lot of sense. Matt, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to answer all of these questions from the community. You've provided such awesome answers, and you and the team do such an incredible job. And I'll let you get back to all the busy work you guys do, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a good one.